Well, welcome to Love the Notre Dame podcast. I don't know which one, but I'm proud to introduce Thom Gatewood. He played for Era, Parsegan, 69, 70, 71. He and Joe Theismann hooked up pretty good in 1970. He averaged 7.7 receiving receptions per game, which still stands today. Other records were broken like 30 years later from Samardzija and the other guys and
Golden Tate.
Golden Tate.
Really? Wow.
I'm in pretty good company with those modern receivers.
You really
Absolutely.
are. You really are.
But what separates everything is he was All-American, obviously, in 1970, academic All-American, and the College Football Hall of Fame inductee 2015. Welcome, Thom.
Thank you. Thank you. I like a trifecta.
Imagine what kind of records you'd have if Thom or Joe Theismann played another year.
Well, yeah, it could have been. There's a lot of what ifs and all that stuff, but
Right.
we'll leave history the way it turned out. It turned out okay.
Megan?
So, Thom, kind of bring us back. Tell us about your high school days, growing up in Baltimore, playing football in high school, and then kind of take us into what your recruitment was like at Notre Dame and what really got you to sign with ND.
Growing up in Baltimore, football was not a factor or anywhere in my thinking until 10th grade. I never played organized football, never played Pop Warner football, no coaching, learning, no plays, no playbook, nothing like that. I was a baseball guy and loved baseball, and I lived and breathed baseball. I went to sleep with my glove. So that was, I thought, if I were going to do anything athletic, that was going to be the way it was going to be. And growing up in Baltimore, being in the shadow of the Yankees and the Tigers and the Red Sox, the Orioles just weren't a factor. But I loved my team, loved that team. And my hero was Brooks Robinson at third base. I emulated and patterned myself after him and became a third baseman during my baseball career. Football happened to me only in gym class because it's part of the curriculum. And I had some really good friends at a junior high school that was in my neighborhood. And the catalyst there was playing some touch football. It wasn't that I didn't touch a football, but I just never played anything that was organized the way that most of the football players who are recruited around the country, they come from a background of really getting involved. So it was new to me. And all the guys basically said when we went to high school, why don't you come out for football? I said, I'm there. I'm just getting an education. I'm going to play baseball. Don't talk about football. That'll just jam up my time frame. And they kept saying, well, we're going to be practicing. We're going to be at school after school. You're going to be home. Who are you going to hang out with? We're all your buddies, and we're going to be here. So why don't you at least try out? Maybe you'll make it. So I tried out 4,000 boys in my high school. 600 came out for football. And we did all those sprints and all those agility drills and sort of a mini combine to go through all of those players to whittle it down to a team. And that core team went on to win 3 straight state championships.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
I became a parade All-American playing football in high school and player of the year and all those things that get the attraction of college football programs. Yet I was a senior and Notre Dame wasn't knocking at my door. There was no Notre Dame recruiter talking to me in my junior year because most of these players, just like today, in today's game, they start contacting you in your sophomore or junior year if you're a standout. But I hadn't heard from Notre Dame and pretty close to being ready to make a decision about where I was going to go. My coach, George Young, came to me. And background on George Young, George was involved with Don Shula and the Colts in Baltimore when they weren't in Indiana, but they were in in Baltimore. Then Shula went to Miami to build championship teams there. George Young followed him, the high school coach. But before he left to do all of those things for his career, he sat down with me and said, I want to challenge you. I want you to take a look at a school that's not on your list yet because they haven't recruited you. He then confessed that he had sent film to Notre Dame on my behalf without my knowledge to try to see if they would be interested in me as a receiver there. He got feedback back. The recruiter, John, uh, came to,
Johnny Ray.
Johnny Ray. He was a defensive coach at the time under Era. He came to Baltimore and sat down with teachers, counselors, everyone except me, except the second day. He liked what he saw in my transcript, and they pulled me out of class. I went down to the counselor's office and had a meeting with John to get a feel for what my thoughts were, what my intentions were. And at the time, Notre Dame was not on my radar, and I wasn't on theirs until that day. And he invited me to take a February trip to South Bend to meet Coach Barsegan and see the campus and evaluate what my future might be.
Awesome.
What did you think of South Bend? What did you think of your first time there?
Never saw South Bend. The weekend that I was there was mostly on campus. Went to a couple of restaurants that were really close to the campus. And the general feel that I got was that there was no real connection with South Bend. It was Notre Dame, Indiana, campus there. The way later on, the way the curriculum and everything was designed, it really was to be self-sufficient and to be, that was your community. Notre Dame was we have a post office, we've got a fire department, we've got a police department. It was pretty cohesive and, basically saying, this is where you want to be.
Was the lack of nightlife a factor in your decision? I mean,
not really.
No.
My high school, with those 4,000 boys, was an all-male environment, and Notre Dame being an all-male environment, that wasn't really a change. Nothing to do with dating and so forth and so on, all those kinds of things. That's all part of the natural process, but that really, not having a nightlife was not a factor. When I came to Notre Dame, my main focus was a degree in 4 years. It was not even to play it down in football. That was not my whole life. I had a really well-rounded education in high school. The balance of the school was 65% white, 35% black. We had an overcrowded situation, so we had some kids went to school early in the day, others came later in the afternoon, a split session. The school was a college prep school, and our design was get prepared for college. And that was really about academics. Sports was extracurricular. It really was just another course of study, a way to build your life and build a core for yourself. So that was the way we were fed it, and that's the way we proceeded. And I was never in any doubt about what my success was going to be academically at Notre Dame or Penn State or USC or UCLA or any of the schools that were recruiting me. That was never going to be a factor. It was just, and in those days, you had a 4-year scholarship. You weren't really auditioning every year the way you do now. So you're granted aid unless you did something that just made no sense. Your conduct was in question, or you decided to leave the school. You were there, and so that was my intent to build a career there. Now, in terms of going through the recruiting process, that was interesting because there were several Hall of Fame type people who crossed my path. Woody Hayes at Ohio State, Joe Paterno at Penn State, John McKay at Southern Cal. You just go down the line, and you mentioned earlier in your opening, John, that I was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2015. Well, Eric Barsegan is in that group, and so was Woody Hayes, and so were all those other coaches. And later on, Darrell Royal would be a factor in my life playing against Texas. So it wasn't just the recruiting situation is not just about where you end up. It's also who you go through to get where you're going. And then after you land at a Notre Dame or at Stanford or wherever you're going, you then are playing against competitors. You're playing against that coach who was recruiting you and wanted you to be a part of his system. So you're enriching your skill level playing against these guys who are really the cream of the crop in college football, who are really going after tooth and nails all these different players every year. So it was kind of interesting, but I didn't have that deep thought until later on, after I went into the Hall of Fame and saw their names,
Right.
the same place that I ended up. So that was kind of interesting.
You told me a little story about Johnny Ray when you were walking to the airport, and you said you walked.
Oh, he invited me to, we had a dinner the first night I was in town, and there was a restaurant in town called Rocky's, and it was a steakhouse. And he parked his car, we got out, and he beelined to the door. And I was walking what we call the Baltimore Walk. And it's just, there was an NFL Hall of Fame running back named Lenny Moore. And Lenny Moore went to Penn State, and he was a great receiver with Johnny Unitas. During my time of watching football, the little bit that I did watch was pro football, not college. At the time, the University of Maryland didn't really have a strong football program. Johns Hopkins didn't have a very strong football program. So it was mostly the pros, and Baltimore had just great teams at that particular time when I was being recruited. So spent time watching that. But Lenny Moore's style was run only as fast as you have to. You don't have to outsprint the defense by 30 yards to make them look like you're a world beat. If you only need to get in by 2 yards, get in by 2 and save that energy for later on because you're going to need it. So that was what that was all. So he criticized me and said, maybe we've made a mistake recruiting you because we're not really sure how quick you are. You can't even get to the rest of the board.
That's great.
So that was Johnny Ray's thing. And the next thing I know, I'm running against his defense, getting beat up freshman year because you can't play varsity football in that time.
Right.
Your first year. So freshman year, the guy who recruits me and brings me to Notre Dame is sending his starters up against me and just beating me and pounding me and pounding me. And I'm wondering, am I going to make it to a sophomore year to even get a chance to be on the varsity? The king of all salesmen, of all those Hall of Fame coaches, Eric Barsegan, lands me. And he lands me on a very humble note in a low-key sort of sales pitch that basically said, we've looked at your transcripts in high school. We've evaluated from intense conversations with teachers and principals at your school just to find out what kind of character you have. And we don't just take any players, and we take this very, very seriously because you're going to be in our company for 4 years, and we want you to get the maximum out of it, but we want to also get the maximum out of you. You might not know your full potential yet. We've only seen film, and film is great, but this is a different level. You'll be competing against guys who have the same kind of skill level you have, but we need people who separate themselves from the average. We're looking for above average people and above average citizens. I liked everything he had to say because it sounded like my mother was talking to me. I mean, her whole thing is spirit because she's very, very religious, and we do Bible study every day in the household growing up. So spirit, body is football and strength, and mind, get a degree. And he said, that's what we can offer you, but you've got to contribute to us. And believe me, the world will be yours because Notre Dame is a very special place.
Wow.
How much did that, go ahead, maybe.
I said, that's an amazing sales pitch. I mean, how could you say no to that? That's incredible. Let me ask you a question. Did you grow up Catholic?
No.
Did that
grew up in the Methodist faith. But I was talking to an Episcopalian across the desk, so he wasn't Catholic either, and he brought that up a few times during the course of recruiting and during the course of his career there. In fact, one year he got a lot of heat because of the starting 11 on offense and the starting 11 on defense of those 22 players. 17 of us were non-Catholic, and that grew when people started taking account of that. They started giving a little critique every once in a while to him and said, well, isn't the Catholic leagues around the country good enough for Notre Dame? And he said, so for him, he said, make sure all you non-Catholics perform at your highest level because I'm taking heat right now. So if you drop off on your skill level, it's sort of like make it justified. So let's all work together.
Wow.
How much, I'm not sure about your career after Notre Dame, other than the short period in the NFL, but how much do you think your degree set you apart from other people that were applying for the same position?
I think I'll go back to the pitch or the promise, because I think a coach has to be a pitch man, but he also has to be a person of their word. And he talked about the 300 radio stations around the country who would hear the name Gatewood, Gatewood, Gatewood if I made the team and if I could do the job that he thinks I could do. And he talked about the national TV games that would be on, where Notre Dame, on average, was averaging at least two games nationally across the country. He had that in his hip pocket because now ESPN 2, 12, 10, 30, everybody's on TV all the time, and you can be seen all the time. So that no longer is a recruiting chip. Well, he had the chip because Notre Dame was in demand, and he also emphasized the fact that Notre Dame is not a regional school. You're not relegated to playing only in Arkansas or Mississippi or in the Southeast and the Southwest. We're national. We go where the competition is, and we are invited to places that other people can't go. And as it turned out, I was in and showing my brand coupled with the Notre Dame brand in Atlanta, in Miami, in Dallas, in Los Angeles, in New York. The Texas teams and the Oklahoma teams and all those teams of the past, they weren't playing all over the country in that kind of a fashion. And the only thing he couldn't find us was a bowl game because Notre Dame wasn't going to bowl games. But playing in all those cities against all that competition was like we had bowl games anyway. So it was exciting, and to have that brand and have that education and carry it was easy to develop as a whole man, because between the Notre Dame clubs that were in every city that you could possibly want to go work in, there were also alums who didn't necessarily have to belong to those clubs, but were CEOs of companies and so forth and so on. So when I got out of school, before I even got out of school, I had summer jobs in companies where there were Notre Dame graduates, and I was not with a sledgehammer breaking down sinks or doing construction jobs. I had management jobs in cities like Baltimore and New York in the summer, getting myself ready for that next step should academics fall through. So as it turned out, Continental Can Company for me was introduced by Vince Namoli, and there is a Vince Namoli facility on campus where he has donated several $1 million, and his name is up there. And at the time, he wasn't that donor and he wasn't that guy, but he was just a guy with a Notre Dame degree who saw promise in me and said, hey, I'd like to take you under my wing and be your mentor. And I did that for 3 years. And when I wound up with the New York Giants in New York, I had a corporate job in the off season with Continental Can. So that was kind of a fun. It was a long relationship versus just some flash in the pan.
Sure. And that's kind of what the 4 for 40 is. You know, you get the 4-year degree and it really kind of changes your life because it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let me ask you, you were talking about the aspect of Notre Dame not being regional, but being more national. What do you think of Notre Dame as an independent? Would you advocate for us staying independent when it comes to football?
I think it works. I think it places you in a very, very unique situation where certainly you have control. I think teams that belong to conferences, you have some protection because you're guaranteed a certain amount of revenue and so forth and so on. But Notre Dame is a hot ticket. They want to see it. They want it around. It has some magic. It's a strong brand. So they're really in command. So I think it makes you unique. It makes you a national school, and it prepares you again. It prepares you as a football player to see it all. So I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I like the way that they sort of interweave the ACC through their schedule. So you're in touch with a conference, but being independent and being able to write your own ticket, I think is indicative of strength. And all that graduate from there have that same kind of uh, sensitivity and strength of mind that I can succeed in any part of the country. I don't just need to stay in the state of Indiana or the state of Mississippi to be successful.
Do you think that our independent status kind of puts us at a deficit when it comes to the current college football playoff system?
The downside, yes, because we almost have to be an undefeated team to really even be considered for that formula. But that's a nuance that's just sort of begun. Um, uh, but the whole time I was here, the team is always their goal is a national title. It's not winning a conference. It's not. It was about winning a national championship, and if that's what it takes to be undefeated, we all start out with win the first game, and we're going all the way. Uh, the toughest game in my career was playing against Southern Cal when we were in a situation where we're 9-0 and going in undefeated, playing against Southern Cal, a team that had lost 3 games or 4 games, and to lose that game. Fortunately, we had redemption and an opportunity to make a stand and go back to Texas against the Longhorns and beat them and have an opportunity to still be in contention for a national title. But that
Yeah,
was
I was schooling Megan on those games just before we went on the air here.
Yeah.
That Southern Cal game in 38-28, Theismann throws for 510 yards, and you freaking lose the game, man. That
yeah. It was just a matter of
fumbles.
it was rough because we went up right away on Tyson went out on a sweep and scored early, but in the space of about a minute and a half, we fumbled in the end zone. They scored. There was a drop pass and interception. They scored. So we were like stung and just in a buzz. And then in the second half, the rains came and it just rained and rained and rained. And try to come back from behind in the rain when your game is about passing. And we had a boatload of catches and throws, and as you said, John, over 500 yards. I think that lasted forever, and maybe it's
still there.
Still there. That was throwing in desperation, and he completed a lot of passes, but it just wasn't meant to be. But it was meant for us to go down and beat Texas and win that game and finish.
That was awesome. That's probably your biggest win of your career, I'd say.
Yeah, that was a big one. That was a big one for the university. Both the games in Texas. Just the other day, I went to see the Hesburgh movie, and it was kind of a throwback to the past. It was pretty cool, and it covered a lot of Father Ted's involvement with the Civil Rights Commission and so forth and so on when he was a man off campus quite a bit and working for the country. But for us, going to the Cotton Bowl, the deal was all the money coming out of those games went to minority scholarships and a fund, an academic fund at Notre Dame, to try to start bringing more minorities into the Notre Dame system. And for me, I was excited, and I flashed back for a second to Coach Parsegan. and talk about those national games and that billboarding of the players' names. Um, Part of my drive for coming to the school had to do with the national impact. I thought and felt that I had something to offer. I had something to say. And what I had to say
Right.
was that African Americans have talent. And we don't just want to showcase it, but if I showcase it and another African American kid sees Thom Gatewood having success in basically a stage that's occupied predominantly by whites, if you see someone, you can see yourself in them. And maybe you can find an opportunity in it. That was the feeling for me. If I had just done that and was interested in Notre Dame at the time, in 1966, I would have been a sophomore in high school. Alan Page would be the only black face on the Notre
That's
Dame
what I was going to
football
say.
team. That wouldn't necessarily be powerful enough for me to say that's the school for me. When I was recruited, there were already 3 African Americans on the Notre Dame varsity. In my class, there were 5. So when I arrived on campus, there were now 8, and the class after mine had 8. So the trend that was happening in the country was an opening up of the gates, and it wasn't just, Notre Dame, but Notre Dame having that big brand, having that national face. All of a sudden, Thom Gatewood in your household makes a difference. Clarence Ellis becoming an All-American as well, a defensive safety, makes a difference. It makes you feel that you can contribute.
Bob
becomes
Minix?
Because then, and Bob Minix was there too, but all of a sudden there becomes a tradition, because it's very difficult to recruit an African American and talk about tradition when the tradition is really about the Irish and Polish and Italians and Catholics and so forth and so on. That's not my heritage. I don't relate to that if that's what you're selling. But if you're selling education and you're selling an understanding of religion and community, and if you're selling those things, Notre Dame puts all of that forward. And now lots more athletes come. The Ross Browners are coming. The Mike Townsends are coming.
Luther Bradley.
We've got All-American after All-American after All-American who are coming through here, and they're class acts. They're people with degrees. And so that was more important to me than just playing the game. It was playing the game at a high level, a high enough level that I became visible, not just another face. I wanted total excellence both in the classroom and
you did that.
You did. Mm-hmm.
But if you were going to a away game at Notre Dame in your 3 years in varsity, was there ever a time where, being an African American, you were disappointed in the opponent's fans?
I guess I wouldn't say disappointed, because I came from a background where the city was divided. Baltimore is a city that's really in the South. Maryland was a southern state, and my father was a victim of discrimination. I saw it. He was a construction worker, a very frustrated man. So it's not that racism didn't exist. It was 1968, 69, 70. You've got everything going on. That whole period, you've got Vietnam War, you have draft dodgers, you have draft card burning, you've got riots in cities, in major cities around the country, fighting over all kinds of things. It's tough in those times, to just go to school and not have yourself impacted by, no matter where you were sitting. Forget about going on the road, sitting at Notre Dame or going to Chicago, or just Mayor Daley is in Chicago and not sure how to handle what's going on there. People not trusting the police. All these issues were all going on while you're still trying to just get an education and just sort of learn your way on what's going on. So for me, going to Atlanta and hearing jeers and racial comments from the players at Georgia Tech, as well as the people in the stands, as well as the hotels who didn't want us to check in because there were African Americans standing there waiting to check in, and they had no clue that Notre Dame would have black athletes. That's the hotel establishment.
Yeah.
And you know, it's you're on TV and you're playing, and it's not that I had never heard things on the field from players before, but it was at such volume and coming out of the stands. We almost, myself and Clarence Ellis and Larry Schumacher, were standing in the at the end of the horseshoe in the stadium in Georgia. And this is a city that touts itself as the New South. It seemed like
Am I correct in saying in 1969 Georgia Tech game?
Yes.
And I heard they were anti-Catholic as well. They were throwing fish at guys.
Yeah. So I come back to the strength we had, and we weren't unprepared because Coach Warsegan talked about it a bit before we got on the plane, before we got there. He said they're not going to like anybody on this team. He said you guys are traveling to the South and you're Yankees. They're going to regard you as Yankees coming to the South, and you're going to see Confederate flags and you're going to see all kinds of stuff, and you know, that's just what's going to happen. So don't let that's just a distraction. That puts you in their wheelhouse. Don't allow those kinds of things to get to you. You concentrate on your game plan, and we'll come out of this thing okay. And I scored that night. Clarence Ellis scored that night. And both those scores by us were silencers. I'm sorry, folks, but we're not affected by, you know, what's going on. So that was a strength for us.
That's sad.
Yes, I mean, there were other schools, other areas that were tough. Going down to LSU, playing in Baton Rouge was a strong situation too. But all across the country, again, you have to understand when I was talking about the racial situation of the time, because you can only measure history by the time you're in. Those who compare Samardzija to Gatewood or Golden Tate to Gatewood, you can't, because it's a different time.
Right.
The receiver that I was, everybody in the stadium knew that they were going to throw to me on third down, because that's the way you played the game then. You had possession receivers. You didn't really throw to the running backs as much as they do now. You didn't have 5 and 6 guys out running routes at the same time. It was 1, 2, 3, a tight end or the wideout getting most of the passes. So when I could catch balls being double covered and be triple covered, it was kind of fun to watch on film afterwards, watching these guys try to stop us. But
tell me a little bit about Cliff Brown, the first African American quarterback.
Yeah, Cliff came from a small town in Pennsylvania, and the hardest thing for Cliff was not his ability. He had great talent. He was a field goal kicker. He was a runner. He could play basketball. He could do any sport known to man. It was tough for him handling the pressure, the pressure about race. It really was. Yeah, he wasn't able to look past that, and maybe it was because of the background of his high school. Again, the high school makeup that I was in, we were mixed race, and we didn't really worry about that. We were playing for our school, and so I got past that. I was already prepared for that. So it didn't really faze me in terms of the performance that was expected of me to be delivered, but it was a lot to think about. It would be great to be in a situation where all you had to do was think about the game you were playing and not have those distractions. But life has its distractions. You're on a roll one day, and and then you're downsized, working with a company that's downsizing, and they fire you, and you're out. Now you got to go find another career, another job, another whatever. And I've been through that too. So
I got one more question, and I'm done. 1971 Purdue game that I told you my father and I went to, and this guy CJ Kozak that was always on the sidelines, a little short guy with a hat on and cigar. he had a death in the family, so he couldn't go. We were on the sidelines in that game, and it frickin' rained. Like, I told Megan about the genuflect game, the genuflect play, and I was amazed being on the sidelines, even though I couldn't see a frickin' play unless it was in front of you. But
right.
just being there. You have any thoughts on that game?
The game was a frustrating game because, we really didn't throw much that year. That was my senior year. We did a lot of option.
Pat Steenberg.
And Pat Steenberg was the primary quarterback. He was a good leader. But it pulled us all back. It almost seemed like we were pulled back from some of the talent that was on the team because we were emphasizing, different things. So we were trying out 3 or 4 different quarterbacks during that, and they were going to the strength of whatever we had, and we wound up with this option situation. And I spent most of the year doing a lot of decoying. And on that particular play, it was really about decoying because I think they thought, okay, they haven't gone to this guy much today. Maybe this is it. This is it. And my ratio of catching touchdowns to catches was pretty high. So that was a pretty good bet that maybe I would be the guy. But we had this design play that we just pulled out of the playbook and said, if we need it, we're going to do it.
Creaney.
Mike Creaney comes through in the clutch and makes it. And I was so excited. I was excited the day he decided to come to Notre Dame because I played against him in high school. And, so I was one of the guys responsible for recruiting him and helping him come to Notre Dame. And he was just ready. He was born for that moment. So it was kind of fun.
You know what's ironic, Tom? If you watch the replay, the Notre Dame right guard was offsides. He was in the frickin' end zone before the pass was thrown.
Yeah, well, I don't like to talk about that. I just like to talk about the score. Lafayette Stadium, we win.
Right on. That's all that matters.
That's awesome.
All right, Megan, take it away.
Tom, you played under Era. What was that relationship like between you and him? And how did he kind of, if at all, mold you into the man you became?
I think the coolest thing about Coach Barsegan was he was a coach on the field, but he was also a community guy. I mean, he's a guy, he owned an insurance company. So he went to school. I mean, he went to work every day. After the football season was over, he was running his own business. And so he was a part of the community. He stayed in this community even after his days of coaching here were over because his roots were here. He raised his family here. He sent some of his kids here. He believed in the school. And so I think he was believable on every level. There was nothing phony about the guy. I mean, everything was out in the clear, transparent. He was so transparent. It's very difficult to get that from anybody anymore. But one day I was on campus and I was heading off campus and I'm walking down Eddy Street and the coach pulls over. At the time, he was a spokesperson for the Ford Motor Company. And he had a Thunderbird that came to him every year. And I see this Thunderbird, and the only gold Thunderbird in the whole city of South Bend that I've ever seen was his car. And he pulls over, and he honks the horn. He rolls the window down and says, "Hey, kid, you need a ride?" So I get in the car, and I go down. He said, "I got to make one stop. I got to go over to Washington. That's where I live. I'm going over to the house." I said, "Coach, I know where you live. I've been in your driveway. I played basketball with some of your neighbors, so forth and so on." And Katie was always, come on, man, have dinner at the house and so forth and so on. So we never felt that we couldn't talk to him. He was the coach. He always maintained that space. There was always, those layers where, yeah, you're the coach, I'm the player. But he was always open. But he had that strength of giving you the eye. He was the best at nonverbal communicating of any person I've known. If you did something wrong, boy, you knew it was wrong, and you better do something to get it straight really fast. But he was a man of his word, and we talked a lot after I was all done, and he even critiqued me. I mean, he spent so much time critiquing film. I went to Roone Arledge in New York when I was in New York, and had an interview with Roone Arledge at ABC Sports and said, I want to work in television. And Roone Arledge said, well, who sent you? I said, Coach Parsegian. He goes, what is that guy doing sending me people? He says, what's the deal? What is the real deal? Because he was already a color analyst for ABC Sports already. He was already in the booth working with Keith Jackson. And so I wanted to sort of follow in his footsteps. I said, hey, I'm in New York. I can do what you do. I watch what you do. I can be prepared. I can get it done. So the first thing Arlie says is, well, do you have an audition tape? I said, no, I've never done any camera work at all. I said, but I have a lot of confidence. I know the game. I think I can do it. If you've hired Parsegian to do it, I know I can do it. And so we sort of chuckled back and forth over the years at that. So I wound up sitting next to Vern Lundquist in the broadcast booth for 4 years doing college football for ABC Sports. So that was my first foray
I don't remember that.
into the communications field. And then when that was over, I decided to join the Directors Guild of America and become a associate producer or stage manager, anything that would put me behind the scenes, because it's a lot safer behind the camera than in front of, because people are less subjective there. They're only objective. So that was a better dose for me. So I've been spent 30 years in television. So the communication thing turned out, never thought that was necessarily going to be my one of the places I would land, but it was. But Parsegian, honest, tell you like it is. If you're dogging it, he tells you. If you're on the right track, he tells you. Got a couple of hugs on the sidelines coming for doing something good, but he always kept you guessing. You never knew if he waved you over, if it was going to be a conference to say, attaboy, or not on my team, So I never assumed that I was going to be the starting receiver on any given week. I mean, I just kept looking at the depth chart, just like everybody else. You come in, you weigh yourself, you look at the depth chart. Fool them again. I'm still number one.
Okay, this is definitely my last question. I want Megan to finish it up. But who was your buddy at Notre Dame? Best buddy. Well, a couple.
That's hard. So I'll answer that quickly with a couple of names. Al Pope was a player from Island, New Jersey. He was an offensive lineman. He didn't survive the 4 years. He left school after his sophomore year. But I met him on the road my senior year in high school, everywhere from Syracuse to UCLA to all over the country. This guy was there. And then we started looking at each other's itinerary, and he'd say, well, I was going to go to Michigan this week, but where are you going? So we would sort of do it so that we'd be in the same place at the same time. So I sort of had a bond with him. But he left after a sophomore year, so I couldn't continue the relationship there. However, we did continue the relationship, and I saw him on my sales routes because I sold advertising every year for at least 3 times a year for 30 years in a row. He and I got together and saw each other, so we continued that relationship. But my roommate, Steve Studer, who lives in South Bend, and now I'm living in South Bend, so we're sort of hanging out again. Stephen was from Port Huron, Michigan. He was a government major, and he decided that he wanted to become a lawyer, and that was his thing. So he's an attorney here in town, doing a great job, and he's done everything from work on the Warren Golf Course to all kinds of other land development and property stuff. So he's a guy who I turned over and trusted dearly in my senior year, because when I was named captain of the football team, there was a lot of people who decided that an African American shouldn't be the first should not be that captain, hold that title. And so I got some nasty phone calls occasionally, some nasty letters, and I didn't really want to have my senior year interrupted by that kind of ugly stuff. So I assigned my roommate, Stephen Studer, the job of, at $5 a week, to screen my calls and screen my mail so I wouldn't have to go through
$5
that.
a week?
What's that?
$5 a week?
Well, that was a lot of money then. That was 1972. Yeah, and he still complains about it to this day. He says, "Oh, come on." I was not in the NFL then. I was waiting for my draft number, so I wasn't in yet. But Stephen did a great job of doing all that screening for me. But those are the kind of things you don't think about. But when you're busy, sort of being a pioneer and you're breaking new ground, some of this happens every once in a while. So.
Totally.
I just didn't want to read about it, hear about it, and I didn't really talk about it. Just so it was there, but he was aware of it, and he was the guy incinerating some of that hate stuff.
Well, thank goodness you had him to kind of, you wouldn't have to be so, seeing it and everything else. Tom, I want to ask you about your grandson, AJ. I think a lot of people are wondering about him, and you and I have kind of a funny connection. My best friend here in Albuquerque was actually your daughter's landlord when AJ was a tiny baby in Baltimore. So that's odd. So tell us kind of his story. How did Notre Dame let him get away?
Well, I don't think Notre Dame let him get away. I think early on I talked about how I was not on Notre Dame's radar when I was in high school. And it was just a matter of seeing some film, and hey, film don't lie. And oh, this guy, how did we miss him? How did we miss him? Well, I sat at a fantasy camp in June at Notre Dame, sat next to the head recruiter for Notre Dame, and on my cell phone, I had a highlight reel of my grandson. And so I put on the tape, tapped him on the shoulder, and said, "Hey, Mike, have you ever heard of this kid?" And he said, "What's his name?" I said, "Well, before I name him, just take a look at some of his highlights." And so he looked at it, looked at it, looked at it. I said, "His name is AJ Dillon," which means nothing because it's not Gatewood, so he can't necessarily draw a conclusion. I said, "Well, that's my grandson. He plays prep school in just outside of Boston. And I think he's going to be a fabulous player for somebody." He said, "But I don't think you guys have him on the radar." He says, "I don't know why we don't. Let me talk to whoever has that region and blah, 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 blah." And speed ahead from June to March of 2016, on my nickel, I bring him to the campus, meet the coaches, go through a recruiting trip with other recruits. And he knows something about Notre Dame. He knows about me, and he's heard what I've talked about what it can do for you and the strengths that it has and so forth and so on. So he was aware of those things. But it was interesting. He's a guy who is an urban guy. His whole thing is about urban. And Notre Dame, even to this day, you can have Eddie's Common and all those. It's still Notre Dame. It's still on the campus. And the week that I brought him out, because on my nickel, and I wanted him to have me show him around as well as the regular recruits, because I thought I could show him a different path than they could. He was also going to visit Wisconsin, and he was also going to visit University of Michigan, all in the same 1 week period. Wisconsin and Michigan, strong running programs, and they want power backs, and that's what he is. Notre Dame has Josh Adams, got Tony Jones. I mean, they've got a bunch of people who are doing well. And at Lawrence Academy, AJ was running the same offense that Boston College runs because the head coach at Lawrence was a successful lineman at Boston College and an NFL player for Cleveland. So in AJ's mind, I'm already prepped with the offense that I'd be running at Boston College. And Boston College was the first school to try to recruit him. And they just stayed in his world stayed in his world, stayed in his world. And he felt like if he went to Notre Dame or even Wisconsin or Michigan, that he'd be getting his playbook and he'd be a slave to, can I get enough reps for the coaches to see me and to really get this offense and to showcase myself? He wasn't really sure. And for sure, Notre Dame wasn't going to give him that urban feel. Ann Arbor could, and Madison could, but not Notre Dame. And again, of all those schools, he felt that his style of running mimicked more of what Michigan was. That's why he signed with Michigan. And then he decommitted when Harbaugh kept recruiting other power backs. He resolved that whole thought that, well, I can step right in because I've had so many reps with that same kind of offense that I think I could showcase myself pretty easily. He also was very close to his mother, who was an educator, and very close to his little sister. And Boston College is it's not that far away from New London, Connecticut. So all those factors were a part of it. He also shared with me, he said, I don't want to live up to your legacy, Dad. I mean, Granddad. I don't want to do that. So so again, I don't think they lost him. I just think they came to the table too late because I think Boston College had already convinced him that he was going to be a star for them.
Wow. Tom, let me ask you, first of all, grass or field turf? What do you prefer? And along those same lines, what do you think about the changes at Notre Dame? Jumbotron, campus crossroads, all that stuff.
The helmet without painting of the helmets.
The helmets, I call it the erosion of traditions, but Irish Guard, no painting helmets, Jumbotron, turf, those types of changes.
Fat Irish Guard. I'm one, just to preface this, I'd love 59,075.
Okay. So let's go to the stadium first. The stadium, the upside is I still feel an intimacy because the sidelines are still tight. Where the benches are and where the first rail of seating begins, it's really still tight. And I always like that. And I don't think that they lost that. So I like that. I'm a natural grass guy. I don't like the turf. We played on turf. We played on both when I played. The predominance was grass. I like the different character that different fields have. It helped me when I went to Texas and played in the Cotton Bowl because you would think they would have been more cognizant of what was going on, but my sophomore year, it was a wet field. They put in a lot of sand to try to do some drainage situations. My own particular thing was to walk the field, every blade of grass of every 100-yard space of every team that we played against. I walked those fields to get any advantage I could possibly get as a receiver. And on a play, on a 55-yard bomb, the first offensive touchdown scored in that game was against a defender who got lost in the mud because I knew exactly where to lead him. And it was on a hash mark, and I ran right up that strip on the dry side of the hash and beat him to the end zone. So,
what game was that?
Turf doesn't have that kind of variation where you can sort of get an advantage and so forth and so on. Jumbotrons, it takes away from me because a stadium like the stadium in Dallas, AT&T Stadium, and all those big, you wind up watching TV. You're watching TV. You might as well stay at home and watch TV. I want you immersed in live action right there. Make the call live, just like us. Forget about trying to get the replay and trying to make a decision. It's
the human factor. That's baseball, football, basketball. Yeah. Why do they do all these replays?
Yeah. So I think I like tradition. I like that there's no dome. I like that you've got some elements that you still have to play in. I like all of that. The helmets, I like the idea of no names on jerseys because that was our tradition. That's a tradition that I like. The only time you got them on your backs was for bowl games.
Right.
The helmets. I like the scars and the bumps and the bruises and the cracks and the chips that are on them.
Me
And,
too.
yeah, you don't get a brand new helmet. They just sort of gloss over it and sort of that made me feel like kind of a a tough guy. It's receivers get the
Exactly.
stigma of being not so tough. But I like to show my armor. My armor was my helmet, so that was okay.
But I say the same thing, Tom, in our group, and these youngsters that are haven't seen a national championship yet. Number one, say, well, you got to change for the recruits because they like this shit.
How about the one I tease the guys about is gloves. Hey guys, how about natural hands? I mean, it's like that. We didn't play with gloves. We didn't drop many passes either. I mean,
Right.
so try doing that for one game or one practice, or see what it's like to not have any kind of sticking device on your hands.
What did Mark Edwards call it today on his live webcam? The white. I'd have to look it up, but spoiled kids.
In regards to gloves?
No, just
Oh.
in regards to college football as a whole.
Oh, okay. Got it. Got it. Yeah, no gloves.
Yeah, I mean, does it seem like a totally different game to you? I mean, with like Twitter and everything else, all the TV, all the gloves, the hype, the this. I mean, does it just feel like it's so different than when you played?
I think I like all the energy. The thing that still freaks me out is all the sideline the sideline signaling that goes on, so that you're lined up in your formation, and all of a sudden there's a kill sign given, and everybody in unison turns to the sideline, including interior linemen. Everybody just pauses and stops, and man, it's so organized, and so we would change plays on the move. I mean, let's call an audible right there on the field. I mean, they sort of everybody's taking away the quarterback's ability. He's really there. He can see it, and if you can't see it, you got the wrong man in the backfield. So I think for me, at least, playing the game of football and playing the receiver, I think people gravitate to a specific position based on personality, and I think coaches figure out how to do things with that. And for me, my life has developed the way that you do progressions with wide receivers. I mean, you're presented with a problem that's in front of you, and sometimes the ball is snapped and you head downfield, and that was just a mirage. They've changed the offense, the defense, to match what you're going to do, and you've got to change on the move. And that's all we do today in today's society. It's just major change, and adjusting. And if you can't adjust, you just fall by the wayside. So, Coach Parsegian, in his wisdom, taught us as receivers to see the whole field the way that the quarterback sees it. You do not focus on one person. Even if it's man coverage, you need to know where the rest of the guys are. If you break that tackle, you got to know where to escape from. You can't just operate. So I think, again, preparation. That's the playbook is cool, but many times your playbook goes out the window because you're down by a margin that you weren't expecting to be down by, and if you don't have the character to be able to adjust and change things around, you're dead. So I'm not sure that maybe some of that spontaneous audibling, changing, you see it in the NFL because they have confidence in veteran quarterbacks who are there. You don't see people looking to the sidelines. They are right there, and that quarterback has the ability. Now, he also has a microphone, so sometimes that offensive coordinator is talking to him in his ear. But
do college do they have the microphone thing like the NFL?
no, I don't think that's happening. I don't think, because if they had that, they would look to the sideline. They could just tell them. So I'm assuming that they're not in communication electronically.
Don, We appreciate it. It's been 63 minutes, but it's been so good. I enjoyed every
It's a
second.
party, man. It's a party. You know, it's
We
You
try
were,
to keep.
you're phenomenal. I mean, it was, yeah, it seemed like 20 minutes. I mean, you're just so easy. Thank you. It's
no,
fabulous.
thank you.
Awesome.
You have some good questions. You know, it's I know some of it will fall by the wayside because that's what editing is all about. And having worked in television, I know the whole deal of that. I always preferred to be in live TV. Live is over. You get on the plane and you go home.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're back in the edit room and you're adding effects and so forth and so on. So,
Mhm.
Can we do this in like a couple days before the the first game of the year,
Louisville.
okay.
like in August?
Louisville.
Would you consider doing another one?
Oh yeah, sure. Why not? You guys are pretty good producers and pretty good on-air people. It's why don't you do this?
Maybe Megan, but not I.
I'll tell you, we're nervous every time we do this, and especially with you, it was like, you know, oh my God.
He said I have a man crush on you, but
Well, I didn't really feel the tension. I mean, you guys, you just cranked it out. I mean, I'm just
you're the man, number
I'm a
44.
pretty easygoing guy. So,
Totally easygoing. So number 44, Tom, I mean, look who's worn that after you. I mean, Justin Tuck, Mark
Derek
Edwards.
Bennett.
I mean, you are like the, people talk about 44, and I'll tell you,
it's a
Susan
cool
did it
number.
right away. Susan's
It's a
like,
cool number, but I didn't think it was so cool when I first got it because they told me you're going to be a running back, and I go, what? Nobody told me this in recruiting. I'm a receiver. Why are you putting me in the backfield? And that's why I got that number. Otherwise, I would have had a different number. So I had to learn to figure that out, and I was lost, man. I wanted to go home a few times, and it didn't come natural. I mean, my grandson has been playing running back since he was 6. He knows how to relax back there. He can read it. He knows it. It's like a sixth sense. For me, it was like, okay, I can run this, and I'm in there. But I wasn't looking for the breakaway lanes. I wasn't looking for, the cutbacks. That it wasn't the natural instinct. I'm used to being downfield. And what they told me, Johnny Ray told me, he says, look, it was pretty easy to figure out. Your high school had an unsophisticated passing attack, and basically you had 2 tight ends. You were the fastest of the 2. He was the blocker, and you would run 4 yards, 5-yard routes, catch a screen pass or whatever, and run 80 yards for a touchdown. You'd break 6 tackles in the process. You demonstrated that you were an open field runner. We didn't have anything like that at Notre Dame at the time. We didn't have it. We thought, hey, this is our guy. He said, we didn't look at you for your hands. We didn't think it was that difficult to catch a pass 4, 5, 6, 7 yards off the line of scrimmage. We weren't running any deep routes. It was just catching it and running, catching it and running. And so,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So I can understand, but they didn't tell me that during the recruiting process. They said, the Parade All-America said, you're the number 1 receiver in the nation. I said, okay. Now, they don't have any rating systems like they've got now with this 4-star, 5-star, 10-star, 12 stars, whatever all that means. It really doesn't mean anything when you get to the school.
What do you think about that? What do you think about these stars? I mean, 4-star, 5. I think a lot of these 5 stars are divas. I'd rather have a 3-star with some heart, like a trainer.
Exactly. You can, and that was the cool part about Woody Hayes and Shem Beckler and those guys from the old school. They took guys and they could
3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Yeah, but they could build you into something because you didn't really, your ego, you didn't come to the school saying, well, I'm a 5-star guy. Put me in, coach. We didn't really know what we were. We played well, and your ego is such that, well, I scored a lot of touchdowns, so I must be pretty good. But it wasn't some classification of 5s and 4s and 3s and 2s. And you guys sit over there and we'll let the prima donnas just have whatever they want, and you guys have to work hard. No, we all had to work hard. in the recruiting process is also easier. I mean, a coach doesn't have to fly to Dover, Delaware to see, you know, John playing this or that or whatever. He just punches up video
Yeah.
on his phone, on his
Mhm.
computer, and can tell you, well, I've seen that guy run 7 plays. He's not our caliber. He's a Division II guy. He's a Division III. It's made their job so much easier.
Mhm.
You can miss a lot of people. That's why some of that happened. That's what could have happened to me. It almost happened to AJ in terms of some of the other schools that didn't really, they decided, that's New England football. New England football isn't that good. Well, Maryland football wasn't very good either when I was playing. But it produced an All-American, and it produced one with AJ being a freshman All-American at Boston College.
Does Baltimore have like a Hall of Fame where they?
I'm in the Maryland State Hall of Fame, and I'm in my high school Hall of Fame. But I don't think Baltimore itself has one.
Or Maryland, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Megan?
it's been a fun ride. It's been a fun ride. Great seeing you guys.
Thanks, Tom. We appreciate it. And please give my best to Susan and of course Jackson.
We'll
Please.
do that. We'll definitely do that.
Hi,
Love
Jackson.
them both.
Tom? It was awesome.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
All
See you
right.
at Legends.
Yeah. Good night.